Oh, it's podcast 35 from Football-Oranje. I'm Michael Statham, and I've got fellow writer James Rowe with me today to discuss the latest Dutch football news, including the first Netherlands squad selection of the season, and is it the same old story for Dutch clubs in Europe? You can listen to and download us on YouTube, iTunes and SoundCloud. Yeah, James, how are you this afternoon?
Very well, thank you. How are you?
Yeah, great. Really excited next weekend. We're going to be meeting up, aren't we, James? So, our next podcast will be live from Amsterdam.
Yeah, second podcast on location, which will be very nice. Next time I'll have to get you a match ball.
We should start this week talking about Dutch clubs in Europe. It's been hitting the headlines quite a lot in the Netherlands. We're down to only 2 teams out of 5 that qualify for European competition. Ajax got through to the playoff round of the Champions League. PSV are already there, thanks to winning the title. But Feyenoord, Vitesse and AZ have all now been knocked out in the Europa League qualifiers. Starting with a question from Abdul to really get things started. It happens many times before when Dutch clubs lose against low standard teams in the Europa League. But why? Why is this happening again to Dutch clubs in Europe? Why have we seen 3 good teams being knocked out? And poorly so as well.
My immediate answer is not just regarding Dutch teams. If you look at the recent Europa League and Champions League results, you'll see many a eye-raising result which nobody expected. Basically, the last 10 years, smaller clubs have gained more professionalism, more determination, more organisation. So when they come up against more seasoned opponents from bigger leagues, they're no longer afraid, they're no longer scared, and they take the game to them. And more often than not, it's proving to be a very, very good result. I was fortunate enough to interview Joey Slegers from Drensen before the first leg of the match against Feyenoord. And he was telling me about the confidence they have, that they're really looking forward to it, and they're not going there thinking that they can't get a positive result, and they managed to get one, and it's highly likely that they'll go on to play in the Europa League group stage now, and clubs are getting more and more confident when coming up against seasoned teams, and it's nice to see new faces as well qualifying for competitions. It's when you look at the Champions League now being a bit more monotonous and predictable in terms of the same fixtures almost every season, you get to a point where that's no longer enjoyable. So although it's a difficult pill for the Dutch teams to swallow, it's not just an epidemic here in the Netherlands, it's happening all over Europe.
They've been embarrassed. AZ were embarrassed against Kaidat from Kazakhstan. Vitesse battled really hard. I think Leonard Slutsky's got them really well set up in their formation. I think he's got some really good, nice players. Matheus Bello is an attacking midfielder, a good signing to add to what they've already got there. And they only lost 2-0 on aggregate to Basel, and they weren't helped with refereeing decisions, a red card, and a poor decision for the first goal as well. So it hasn't helped Vitesse, but I suppose they come up against tough opposition in Basel, whereas Feyenoord and AZ haven't really got many excuses. And even though, yes, they did come up against opposition that were fired up and eager to play in the night, they simply must be putting these teams away over 2 legs. Don't you agree?
Yeah, but also if you look in the case of Vitesse, the second leg was away, and I think that is really decisive. I think that's if Wolfswinkel scoring a very important goal in the first leg against his old club. When you play these knockout games over 2 legs, where the second leg is, it's becoming more and more decisive, and also the fact that they still haven't scrapped the away goal. The away goal was brought in the 70s to encourage attacking play in European matches, and it's just become so decisive now, where teams don't want to concede away goals, and that's a starting point for some, when it really should be, are we going out to win this game to try to get to the next round?
Yeah, a couple of questions from Alex Almaty. He asks about, do you think some Dutch clubs, especially Vitesse, were avoiding to qualify for the Europa League? Was there a lack of effort from Dutch clubs in the qualifying?
No, I don't think so at all. I mean, I said harboured ambitions of reaching the knockout phases of this competition. Feyenoord wanted to use it as a springboard to show that they've learnt from their recent Champions League campaign. I'm sure Slutsky also wanted to get off to a good start in a European sense with his career here in the Netherlands. He's come to the Netherlands by his own admission to start his career in Europe, and he wants to do the best he can. But I think I think it was just a touch of naivety regarding regarding opponents, and also a bit of bad luck as well. And it's just you've got to be so careful now. This is a world game. There are no easy games at European level, and this needs to be shouted from the rooftops that you've got to be on the money all the time in Europe, home and away. You've got to treat everybody with respect. You've got to really go for it, and you've got to really deserve your place in the next round of the tournament.
I think what some people maybe haven't thought of, though, is that it's not actually because Dutch teams aren't as good as people maybe sometimes make them out to be. Dutch teams do have good quality. Feyenoord are a good team. I think what we saw in these qualifying matches, though, was a culmination of events. Feyenoord not only lost to Trenchen that week, they also lost to the Graafschap, a new promoted team in the Eredivisie, and well beaten as well. 2-0, it was a very poor performance. Feyenoord did miss some chances. They've had load of players injured, suspended. It hasn't been easy for them, just in general, to be honest, hasn't it, recently? And I think that in the Europa League that showed even more. Trenchen were fired up. A trip to Slovakia is not the first thing you want to do when you're not having a good week. But how about Gio van Bronckhorst? He's had these kind of spells before in charge of the club. He went one time losing 6 games in a row, I believe, the season before they won the league. And then when they won the league, they won many games in a row, 9 games in a row then. So what's it like with him being a manager? Do you still think that he can pull another one out of the bag? Final beat Excelsior 3-0 today. Are they again on return? Are they going to now hit some positive results?
It's possible, but I think he would have wanted to extend the European run. As you mentioned about the losing run they had the season before they won the league, it was actually 7 games, and I think the pressure is on him to win something this year. They've got aspirations to build a new stadium. Feyenoord. They're looking at a regeneration of the club. They want the club to improve even more. They want to become even more powerful in a domestic sense. So I think the pressure is on him to win something this season in order to keep hold of his job long term. But he's winning the Dutch Cups and winning the Eredivisie title for the first time in 18 years. He's bought himself a lot of credit and an awful lot of time. But I think this European disappointment, it'll be difficult for them to put behind them in the short term. But I think around about October, November time, they'll start to turn up again and maybe go on to have a decent season still.
Yeah, I do think I've got a bit of faith in Feyenoord to pull it out of the bag and turn their season around. Van Bronckhorst has won 5 prizes in 4 years, and that's outstanding when you consider where the club were before he arrived. Only 10 years ago we were seeing a very young Gigi Wijnaldum starting for Feyenoord as they were finishing in mid-table that season. A 10-0 defeat to PSV. 10 years later now, look at them, they're back at the top of the Dutch game. And in Europe, next season they've really got to go for it and qualify for European competition again. Let's have a quick look at the opposition though. So Trenchen, maybe we're playing them down. Maybe we're saying that they're not maybe a good team. They're low on quality. An interview with Joey Slahers the other week, he said that in a response to a question, where would Trenchen finish if they were in the Eredivisie, and he said, I think we would finish in the top half. He thinks his team are a good team, and fair enough, why not? Ricardo Moniz is a manager, and we had a question about who is he? Who is he a good manager? What do you think about his work in Slovakia?
He's really coming into his own. He's had stints at Tottenham Hotspur as a skills coach, and the same as Feyenoord as well, with skills and being assistant coach as well, and spells with FC Eindhoven and Netherlands in Denmark and Ferencváros in Hungary. He's really coming into his own now as a manager, and I think that if he continues to have a good season where Trenchen qualify for the Europa League, I think he will do his reputation no harm at all, and I would not be surprised. I know it's still very early, but I would not be surprised if we see him managing in the Eredivisie in future seasons.
All right, James. So we had a good conversation about some of the failures in Europe this past couple of weeks. But how about Ajax getting through to the last round of the Champions League qualifiers? They guaranteed Europa League group stage football even before that tie, but didn't they play well against Anderlecht? A 2-2 draw away from home and a 3-0 pummeling at home, I should say, Stanley Age barely took the ball out of their own half in the first half. We saw some really good performances from Dusan Tadic, Hakim Ziyech, even Huntelaar was on form, finding some good finishes. What did you make of their performances?
Well, I thought it was a very good win, considering they were 2-0 up in the first leg and went on to draw 2-2, and disappointment could have dominated to come back and win the second leg 3-0. And I give them a very good chance of qualifying for the Champions League group stage. Same goes for PSV as well. I think both Dutch sides have got winnable ties. I think the crux will be the second leg for Ajax in Kiev, whereas PSV play at home in the second leg, so that will be their advantage. But I think that both teams will qualify for the Europa League, for the Champions League group stage, and it will be a real shot in the arm because it's a long time since both qualified.
I too hope that happens, James. Ajax can beat anyone on their day. We've seen that, but they can also lose to anyone on their day, or more when it's not their day. We saw that against Heracles at home, a 1-1 draw. A scrape to lucky penalty win, a 1-0 over VVV this weekend. But when they play in the Champions League, it's the big occasion. The players come to the fore when they're needed, and they do pull out these fantastic performances. They just need to translate that to a league campaign, and in my opinion, they'll comfortably win the league if they can do that. But so far we haven't seen that, and they have been a little bit fortunate in their league matches. Question from Kevin: why have Andre Onana and especially Hakim Ziyech not left Ajax yet? Seems certain that they would have been nearing the end of last season.
I think they both perhaps being choosy with their possibilities and where they would actually go, and I think that's a very good. I think that's a very good sign. Ziyech, when he was at FC Twente, famously turned down Sampdoria. There were it was mooted to be going to Roma this season, but I think it's a case of the club waiting for the right offer in terms of the money being paid, and also the player waiting for the right club. And I think that's a very sensible decision from a player's point of view.
Yeah, Dusan Tadic said this week about Hakim Ziyech. He's a smart guy. He knows what he's doing on the pitch and off the pitch. If he wants to move, he'll get the right move that he wants and it feels it's right for him. Good point about Twente when he was there. He was really choosy about leaving the club, and he did want to leave Twente, but the right club just wasn't coming along for him. And it's the same now at Ajax. I feel like he's a few suitors short though. Roma did come in, but then went cold on it all, and I really feel for him because he does deserve a big move to play for an even bigger club than Ajax, but it just hasn't quite come along yet. As for Andre Onana, I feel like he's not allowed to leave now that the transfer window's closed in England and is closing around Europe. I think could be hard pressed to find a replacement at this point. I think Erik ten Hag has now put his foot down and said no more players are leaving our club at this stage of the summer.
I think it's going to be very interesting. Obviously the English window is shutting earlier than usual, and other moves being muted. But hopefully it will die down a bit, because I just think that the fever of who did you buy, buying this one, buying that one. It appears in some cases, Michael, that some fans are more excited about buying and selling than the actual football that goes on the pitch, and that's a bit disappointing for me.
Okay, James, let's move on and talk a bit more about the Dutch national team. It's getting exciting. Where national team football is nearly back, and we get to see the Netherlands play again after missing them throughout the whole of the World Cup. They've got a game in September against Peru, and there's a few rumours already about who may be picked for the squad, who may not. And we had a few questions in about who could be in the squad and whether they deserve to be. First one is from William, and he wonders whether Ronald Koeman should start making Frenkie de Jong at Ajax an automatic choice in midfield for the starting 11. Do you agree with that, James? Is he ready yet, or does he need a bit more time on the outskirts?
I think he needs a bit more time. If you look at the upcoming competitive matches against world champions France and Germany, could come a little bit too soon. But this game is due to Wesley Sneijder's 134th and last farewell Dutch international, so it should be a positive party and positive match. Be interesting to see a South American team come to Amsterdam and show their worth. I'm actually going to be attending the match, so I'm looking forward to seeing what Peru are all about. But it'd be interesting to see who he picks. I hope that he mixes it up a bit. For example, Martin de Roon and Hans Hartenborg at Atalanta. Atalanta appear to be in fantastic form. Okay, it's only the Europa League qualifiers, but they are demolishing some opponents, and that can only be a good thing. Football-Oranje readers and listeners will know about my respect and how highly I regard Brian Linssen. Considering this is a farewell friendly game where it's just basically to see off one of the greatest players and the most capped player in Dutch national football team history, why wouldn't you bring him into the fold? He's been so important for Vitesse last season, this season as well in terms of Europe, and he can be a very important player. And okay, he doesn't necessarily play for one of the top three teams, doesn't play for a seasoned European team, but he's got qualities. And if, like with Denzel Dumfries at PSV, also started the season really well. Koeman would be doing himself a massive favour not to disregard these players. And if he was to pick the likes of Dumfries or Linssen for friendly games and to ease them in, it will give the majority of other young Dutch players in the league a real incentive to know that they are in the frame to eventually be capped. And I think it will build up the character and resistance of the national team going forward.
Yeah, two good picks there. Linssen and Dumfries must surely be in Koeman's thoughts into picking this squad. Frenkie de Jong, in my opinion, should certainly be in the squad and start to think about making minutes on the pitch. But as for starting in the midfield, he is what the Netherlands need going forward. He's that midfielder that's needed in the 6th position. I think it comes a bit early for him. As you say, James, the games against Germany and France will be a bit too early for him at that level. I do think for now, with the 5 at the back as well, it is made so that the Netherlands don't have to play a defensive midfielder and they can play those more creative midfielders in front of the back 5, so not having to track back as much. So it kind of suits at the moment. At the moment, they don't have a defensive midfielder. And on in-form, Kevin Sturotman is the perfect option, but we haven't seen that in a while. A question now from someone who hasn't sent in a question ever before to us. So his Twitter handle is Robin Issings. I'm going to call him Rob. Should Arno Groeneveld be in the Netherlands squad? Groeneveld plays for Club Brugge. He moved to them after a really good season with NEC Nijmegen and originally comes from the PSV Youth Academy. James, what are your thoughts on Groeneveld? Is he likely to be picked?
I don't think he's in the frame, but it's definitely something about him going forward. He's had a very good season at NEC, made his name at NEC, as you say, and got that move to Belgium. And I think it's green shoots coming up now when names are being mentioned, which is a really good thing. Young names are being mentioned. It gives Koeman more scope in order when picking his squad. And this is something that the national team has lacked in terms of structure in previous years, especially with how messy it was behind the scenes. And I think he will eventually be brought into the fold, but I think Koeman will be looking to build the house brick by brick and becoming more competitive. And when I look at the squad at the moment, and you have Stefan de Vrij, and you have Matthijs de Ligt, and Martin de Roon, and David Pruppen, and Promes, this is a good base upon which to go forward and build. And if you can build young players alongside this, step by step, it will help the national team going forward. But I think, as in the case of, as we just spoke about with Frenkie de Jong, I think it might just be a little bit too early.
Yeah, I think it'll be a bit too early too. I think he's a very good year in Belgium to really get into Koeman's thoughts. And finally, Abdul asks, Steven Bergwijn and Jorrit Hendricks, 2 players from PSV, can they be selected by Ronald Koeman?
They can be. Bergwijn is a tremendous talent, and it won't be too long before he's a regular in the squad. I interviewed Jari Schuurman for Football-Oranje back in March this year, back in February, sorry. And we were talking about Bergwijn because Schuurman played with him at under 17 level, and he said his pace is electric, and he's the best player. He was the best player that he's played alongside so far in his career. And I think Bergwijn will be a mainstay going forward. And his presence in the dressing room as well. I saw that he stated that in the case of the working relationship he has with Denzel Dumfries, it's like they've been playing together. He gave a recent interview where he said that it's like they've been playing together for 3 years, when it's only really been a very short space of time. So in the case of Bergwijn, I think he's got a solid future being involved in the Dutch national team. As Hendricks, I think he may be called into squads to fill in terms of manpower. But I think in the case of those two, Bergwijn has the chance to accrue many caps going forward in the future.
As my opinion, I think Jorrit Hendricks isn't Netherlands quality. He is a good player for PSV. But I'm not sure he's the answer going forward in midfield. Steven Bergwijn, a player that a couple of years ago frustrated me, perhaps didn't get the minutes, the opportunities that he deserved at PSV under Philip Cocu. He was always a little bit apprehensive to play some younger players, but Bergwijn, he's finally fulfilling his potential. Last season he was terrific. This season he looks like he's going to be even better. A man who can be relied upon as well in attack. But when he first came through, there was so much promise, which he never quite lived up to. But now he's really pushing on. I'm so happy to see that. And I agree. I think he'll be in the squads all of this year and going on forwards after that. Okay, so those are some of the options on the edge of the Netherlands squad. And we're looking forward to seeing some new names in the selection. Finally, James, Eredivisie is back. And we've had 2 match rounds at the time of this podcast. What have you made of the first couple of weeks? Have you enjoyed it?
Yeah, I've always enjoyed it. I've been watching the league firsthand for more than a decade. I thought NAC Breda had a very good result yesterday against the Graafschap, and I think that we'll see them push on in the coming weeks. A decent result for RZ today, 4-1 away at Emmen, and I must give a shout out to Fortuna Sittard, who were very unlucky not to get a point at home to PSV last night, conceding a goal in stoppage time. And it's a long old season, as we know too well. You know, it's an acquired taste of this league, but I think we're going to see many a twist and turn ahead, and be very interesting to see what happens. Yeah,
nice little recap of the first couple of weeks there. And notably, RZ are top of the table after 2 matches because of their goal difference, a 5-0 win against NAC Breda and a 4-1 win at FC Emmen today. So a good start for them. I think they played 2 of the weak teams in the league. But how about Feyenoord? We've talked about them already a little bit in this podcast. With the likes of RZ and Vitesse, already looking quite good so far this season, pushing for top 3. They both have ambitions to break into it again. Are Feyenoord the losers out of the top 3? PSV and Ajax look strong and likely to go for the title. Are Feyenoord going to stick around?
I think that Feyenoord will complete the top 3. I mean, I said before the start of the season they'll finish second. I'm not going to switch from my predictions after only 2 rounds. Football-Oranje listeners know what they were, and your predictions and Mike's predictions too. I certainly won't be switching from them. I think they will. I think the top 3 will be the traditional top 3. And I still think Feyenoord will go on to have a good season. Warning signs for ADO Den Haag, I think, with losing both their opening games to Emmen and Heracles. I think that's warning signs for them. And Willems Twee with a timely win. Groningen bottom of the league. I had a discussion with Mike on Twitter the other day where the step up between the Dutch second division and the Eredivisie for Danny Buis might be a bridge too far. Michael also mentioned about the lack of investment possibly at Groningen. But as we've spoken to before, you know, here in the Netherlands, if your books don't match and they're not in order, you are monitored by the Dutch FA in terms of your outgoings and not living beyond your means. And in terms of real contracts being offered for real money and contracts that need to be honoured, I think clubs are just being very, very shrewd and very, very careful with the contracts they give out. You know, whereas if you compare that to the Premier League, where clubs are giving out money, astronomical amounts of money, but yet 3 of them will get relegated, and that will have ramifications for them. Whereas here, you know, the healthiness and the fairness of the club and making sure the club is solvent is very important. And I think that particularly the Premier League could take a big leaf out of the Eredivisie book in that respect.
A good point. There isn't a lot of money flitting around in the league. And that's because most of the time the money goes back into the youth team. So you see that all the time with AZ Alkmaar. Terrific effort from them and their club to get bigger, but the right way. one of my notable starts for the season was Heracles Almelo. I gave him no chance at the start of the season. As you said, James, my bottom three. But yeah, no, they a really good point at Ajax and put Ardit and Haak to bed. 4-2 win. What I have noticed is that I always play down their summer signings, but only one of them has actually been in their starting 11, or two, sorry, I should say. Dalmau, the striker, and Blaskovic, the goalkeeper. But they've both been decent so far. The striker got his first goal today for the club, and yeah, the Rostman in goal hasn't been too bad. But a lot of the other players are still that same starting 11 from last season. So, you know, the new manager's come in there and done a decent job. Question from Cam to end this podcast, a really interesting question that I'm sure some people do think about quite a lot when it comes to Dutch football and comparing it to other leagues. He asked us if Ajax, Feyenoord and PSV win the Premier League with their current squads, where on the table would they finish? So, as a reaction to that, on Twitter we put on a poll and we asked our followers to choose where they think they would come, PSV, the Eredivisie champions, if they were to play this season in the English Premier League. And the results were very, very interesting indeed. And I wonder what you thought about this, James. So 10% chose PSV as finishing in the top 6 of the league. Interesting. Among the likes of Chelsea, Arsenal, Man United, Man City. 41% said that PSV would finish between 7th and 10th position. 38% said between 10th and 17th position. And 11% said they would be relegated. Very interesting statistics, and that around about the same amount of people suggested the top 6 is getting relegated, and around about the same amount of people said top half to the bottom half. 51% said they finished top half, 49% in the bottom half. So no one really knows, do they, James? No one's really got a strong idea where they're going to finish, but the winning choice was 7th to 10th. PSV have got some very good players. You've got, you know, the likes of Lozano that were scouted by Arsenal this summer, keeping Jeroen Zutter, a Netherlands international. But at the same time, Luc de Jong, who couldn't hit the back of a barn door when he played for Newcastle United in the Premier League. So it swings and roundabouts with that team, and just how they cope in the English Premier League is too hard to say. What do you think?
Yeah, no, I agree. But I think people are in a situation now where they love to compare. They love to compare teams and leagues and players and abilities. And I always advocate just accept it for what it is. We, having done this podcast for many years, we all know that the Eredivisie is an acquired taste. It's not everybody's taste, but it's an acquired taste. And when you understand what goes on in this league, it can be a very good watch. I think a lot of people like to make presumptions that if you're the top scorer in the Netherlands and you go to England or France or Germany, it doesn't mean that you're going to be world class. But you've got to remember, we've had players in this league such as Romario, Ronaldo, Van Nistelrooy. You know, these are world class strikers that have played in this league. Arjen Robben was started out in this league. You know, and there are some great players to find. I just think that with the commercialism as well, and the way the Premier League, for example, it seems to be a horse which is completely out on its own at the minute in terms of clubs spending vast amounts of money, but yet 3 of them are still going to be relegated. I mean, you see today Huddersfield Town spending 20 million euros on Congolo. They got beat 6-1 by the reigning champions, and their goal difference already is -7, and it's going to be a long, hard season for Huddersfield. And you see in the case of Fulham played a championship final against your team. I'm not saying it to be awkward or to rile you up at all, Michael, but they won a one-off game on a neutral ground to get promoted, and have gone on to spend in excess of £100 million. And it's just sometimes it just beggars belief. But you would hope that there will be ramifications eventually. Not that clubs go bust or anything, but as I've said before, you know, if the Premier League could take a leaf out of the Dutch FA's book, where the clubs are put into financial categories and they have to present their books to the Dutch FA every single year, and if they don't match and if they don't add up, they're threatened with sanctions. So the Dutch FA are trying to help the clubs remain solvent and help the clubs to remain in business.
Yeah, so you're right. There's far too much money flying out about the Premier League nowadays. Of course, it's easy to say, PSV would finish top half. But then, you know, if they were in the Premier League, they'd have all this extra money as well on top. There's two things to think about. It's the same argument when everyone talks about Celtic being in the Premier League, but of course they don't have the riches of the Premier League to be able to compare that. So hard to say.
And also, if you think of last night, PSV reigning champions went away to newly promoted Sittard and very just about came away with a win. That's akin to a high-flying Premier League club going away to the one of the lowest ranked teams in the league and barely scraping a win. So it swings and roundabouts. I think I can understand why people do it, but I think they should just learn to love and respect and accept leagues for what they are, and also enjoy them a little bit more, perhaps.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. Yeah, enjoy the league, love it, because it is what it is. James, thank you very much for today. And a very good podcast indeed. And I look forward to seeing you next week for an even better live one.
Look forward to the third live podcast on location and the second one in Amsterdam, yes.